Thank you, Evelyn, and thank all of the organizations for pulling this together. This has really been a bad week. Let me say that to start out with. This has been a really bad week. I've been very close friends with Vladimir and Yevgenia for more than a decade, and I never could have imagined that we would be facing a situation where Vladimir has been sentenced to 25 years in jail. And that's not just a life sentence, that's a death sentence for Vladimir. Vladimir has been poisoned twice, as you all know. And those were not, he recovered from the poisoning, but he didn't recover from the poisoning. Those poisonings each time left him with terrible, terrible disabilities. Yevgenia told me a story about how he couldn't feel his feet after the poisonings, and she came up with this interesting idea to rehabilitate him, which is to walk along the beach on really sharp shells for hours in order so that eventually the pain from walking on shells would start to wake up his nerves. And they would do this for hours. And many, many other things. He had a stroke. He had to learn how to eat and talk and walk. And every time Vladimir was poisoned, and he was poisoned twice, as soon as he could get back on his feet, he went back to Russia. And I told him after the first poisoning, don't go back. And he said, I'm a Russian politician, I'm a patriot. These are my people, this is my country, I'm going to go back. They poisoned him again. I told him after the second poisoning, don't go back. Of course, he didn't listen. And I had dinner with him and Yevgenia 3 days before he went back this time. The war had already started. I had been invited to give a fundraising talk at the Museum of London, and I asked Vladimir before the dinner if he would come and say a few words. And this was after the war had started. He was about to go back to Russia, and he comes to this fundraiser and calls Putin a killer, a war criminal, and all the same things that he called Putin in that video at the very beginning, and all these other things. And then we sit down at dinner, and I beg him not to go back. And I have a little bit of experience with these conversations before Vladimir with Sergei Magnitsky, where I told him to leave Russia when they were pursuing all of our lawyers, and he refused to leave. And so I had a real sort of traumatic history with this type of thing. And I thought, you know what, I'll even offend Vladimir if I have to try to convince him not to come back. And I went through every possible argument and even some offensive ones to try to convince him. And he was unmoved. He wasn't offended, but he was unmoved. And he went back. And I had a book launch coming up in which Vladimir is, he features as a big person in my second book. And I wanted him to come to the book launch, which was taking place, I think, a couple weeks after our dinner, and he said, I'll be at your book launch, and I was just counting the days until he was going to get onto that airplane from Moscow back to Washington, and of course, as we all know, he didn't get back on that plane. He got arrested, and then he was arrested, and we thought, maybe this is just one of those 15-day deals like he had been arrested for many times before. But 10 days into his 15-day deal, they then laid the first set of charges, calling the war a war. And then second set of charges came out, being a member of an undesirable organization, and then, of course, treason, 25 years. And Vladimir has now been, he was in solitary confinement. He couldn't walk on shells or to walk anywhere, and he can't feel his feet. He's losing the sensation in the left side of his body. He's not well. He won't survive. And so, as a friend, as a colleague, as a person who cares, I've made it my single most important priority in my life to do everything I can to save Vladimir's life. And I've been here in Washington with Evgenia for the last 3 days, and we've gone around every senator and House member who would meet with us, specifically to get this designation unlawfully detained. Why do we want it? Because that designation, it's a legal definition under this Levinson Act, and that designation means that the State Department and the U.S. government more broadly will use all of its resources to get Vladimir home. And there's a lot more resources that the U.S. government has than I have, or Evgenia has, or any of us individually in the room. I mean, I've got a lot of ideas how to save Vladimir, but in the very short term, I'm a very focused person, and that is the thing we need to focus on, is getting that designation. I understand from Senator Wicker that there are 60 people who signed the letter to the Secretary of State, and I hope by the end of the day, if anyone here in this room knows any member of Congress, call them and get them to sign that letter today, because I'd like to see that number go above 100. We need to make a big statement to the State Department that this designation has to come. Evan Gershkovich was also unlawfully detained. He got this designation in like 10 days. We've been waiting a year. And that has to be our first and most important priority. And so I'm going to continue to fight for Vladimir. We're going to the Strasbourg on Monday at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. We're going to go to Germany. We're going to go to London. We're going to go everywhere, not just here, to get everybody riled up, to use all the powers that we have. Vladimir is, there's not a person who Vladimir has met who doesn't love Vladimir and is not ready to do whatever they can. And it's amazing. I've worked on a lot of different advocacy campaigns before, but I've never seen anything like this, where the moment that I make a phone call, everybody then jumps to attention, and everybody does whatever whatever is in their means to do, and we will continue doing that, and we will continue to push, and we will get Vladimir out of jail. And they asked me on BBC the other night if I could say something to Vladimir, what would I tell him right now? And what I would tell him is, sit tight, we're coming to get you. Thank you.